You sit in the dim light of your office. You look at the glowing monitor. A massive drawdown has systematically erased 6 months of your most careful, disciplined algorithmic planning. Your chest tightens. Why does your body react to a changing pixel like it is a physical predator? You think this is just a normal emotional reaction to a bad trade. You assume it is a standard psychological response to watching your hard-earned capital evaporate into the market. But the real truth is far deeper and entirely biological. You are not just reacting to a temporary financial loss. Are you actually experiencing severe evolutionary altitude sickness? The modern financial market is a harsh, unforgiving, and deeply unnatural environment. It is cold. It is volatile. When you are managing heavy gamma exposure or tracking the rapid, violent decay of zero-day options, your brain does not process this as a complex mathematical puzzle. It processes the volatility as a literal threat to your physical survival. You are effectively standing on the side of a massive frozen snow mountain. You are meticulously lacing up your professional climbing shoes. You are actively preparing your mind for a grueling 6,000-meter expedition, or perhaps even a final agonizing push to the summit of Mount Everest. The air is incredibly thin. You are stepping directly into a financial death zone. How does your ancient biology handle this extreme altitude? It panics. Your brain triggers a prehistoric alarm system that was designed entirely for the ancestral savanna, not for a multi-monitor trading desk. The amygdala, an almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep inside your temporal lobe, detects the financial threat and immediately overrides your rational thought processes. It floods your bloodstream with a massive toxic surge of cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate violently spikes. Your breathing becomes rapid and incredibly shallow. You are strapped into your heavy climbing gear, staring up at the terrifying peak of a volatile market, and your physical body is screaming at you to turn around and run. This is a brilliant, highly evolved mechanism for escaping a charging predator. But it is an absolutely terrible mechanism for managing a diversified portfolio. Why does this ancient survival instinct completely destroy your financial future? To understand the destruction, you must look at the pioneers of behavioral finance. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman and his research partner Amos Tversky spent their careers mapping the irrational flaws in human cognition. They developed prospect theory. They proved mathematically that human beings do not process financial gains and losses symmetrically, demonstrating that the psychological pain of losing $10,000 is vastly more intense than the joy of gaining that exact same amount. They called this powerful biological glitch loss aversion. A prehistoric gain meant you had extra food for the night. A prehistoric loss meant you starved to death. Your ancient ancestors had to be hypersensitive to loss in order to survive the brutal conditions of the early world. Does loss aversion disappear when you fund a brokerage account? No, it magnifies. You become absolutely terrified of realizing a loss. You hold on to bleeding positions for far too long, refusing to cut your trades because the emotional pain is processed by your ancient brain as a literal death sentence. You lose all perspective of the macro trend. But the psychological bias of loss aversion is only the beginning of your problems. What is the actual physical damage happening inside your skull when you stare at a crashing chart? Look at the groundbreaking work of Dr. Robert Sapolsky. He is a prominent neuroendocrinologist at Stanford University who spent decades living in the wilderness, studying the devastating effects of extreme chronic stress on wild baboons. He observed exactly how a constant, unrelenting flood of glucocorticoids, the body's primary stress hormones, physically alters the structural architecture of the primate brain. He discovered something terrifying. He found that chronic stress literally shrinks the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the exact part of your brain responsible for logical planning, complex risk assessment, and long-term financial strategy. Your biological hardware is actively failing you. How can you execute a rational algorithmic trade when your analytical brain is physically shrinking inside your head? You cannot. When financial stress reaches its peak, you completely lose the biological ability to think in years or decades. You start thinking purely in minutes and seconds. You panic sell at the exact bottom of the market. You abandon your meticulously researched, custom-coded strategies. You seek immediate, desperate relief from the unbearable psychological pressure, sacrificing your long-term wealth just to make the biological pain stop. Financial stress is so incredibly dangerous, Beck. They make catastrophic, life-altering mistakes. They throw their strict risk management rules completely out the window. The rational mind goes to sleep, leaving the impulsive, dopamine-hungry animal in charge of the trading account. To survive the extreme altitude of financial stress, you must ruthlessly defend your cognitive energy reserves. You cannot stare at the charts all day long. You must build strict, unbreakable mechanical rules for when you engage with the market and when you absolutely must disconnect. You have to put down the data. But merely closing your laptop is not enough to reset a hijacked nervous system. How do you physically purge the cortisol from your bloodstream? You must subject yourself to a massive physical interrupt. You must engage in a prolonged, rhythmic physical challenge that forces your nervous system to reset its baseline. Imagine embarking on a continuous 40-day walking expedition. You step onto an ancient route, committing to walking continuously for over a month, moving step by step from your starting point all the way to a distant western beach. This is not about leisure. It is about a grueling, unrelenting physical challenge. When you walk continuously for hours on end, your bilateral movement stimulates both hemispheres of your brain. It metabolizes the trapped stress hormones. It forces the amygdala to power down and allows the shrunken prefrontal cortex to finally expand and recover. You replace the erratic, chaotic dopamine spikes of the trading screen with the slow, steady, earned dopamine of physical endurance. Why is physical endurance the ultimate cure for financial panic? Because it reminds your ancient brain that you are still in control of your survival. The market will always be chaotic. The global macro landscape will always be terrifying and unpredictable. But your internal environment must remain calm, structured, and profoundly disciplined. You cannot control the price action of a zero-day option, but you can entirely control the physical movement of your own body. By conquering a massive physical challenge, you prove to your nervous system that you are resilient. But there is one final profound psychological shift you must make to completely inoculate yourself against financial stress. What if your entire perception of stress is fundamentally wrong? Consider the paradigm-shifting research of Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She is a health psychologist who completely rewrote the scientific consensus on the human stress response. For decades, the medical community aggressively warned that all stress was inherently toxic and would inevitably lead to cardiovascular disease and early death. McGonigal analyzed massive long-term epidemiological datasets and discovered a profound counterintuitive truth. She found that stress only damages your physical body if you deeply and genuinely believe that stress is harmful. When you view your financial anxiety as a natural biological mechanism designed to enhance your performance, your physical biology actually changes. Your blood vessels do not constrict in fear. Your heart pumps more efficiently. Your brain releases oxytocin, a powerful neurochemical that encourages resilience, courage, and social connection. Can you transform your paralyzing financial panic into pure biological power? Yes, you absolutely can. You must completely change your internal narrative. When you look at that violently red portfolio, you must recognize the intense pounding in your chest, not as a sign of impending doom, but as your body aggressively allocating energy to help you focus. You are not dying. You are adapting to a higher altitude. Just as a professional climber must slowly and painfully acclimatize to the brutal, oxygen-deprived conditions of a 6,000-meter expedition, a professional trader must acclimatize to the brutal, unforgiving volatility of the global financial markets. You must embrace the biting cold. You must lean into the extremely thin air. You must treat your financial journey like a professional mountaineer treats a massive summit attempt. You do not sprint wildly up the side of the mountain. You prepare your gear meticulously. You respect the terrifying power of the elements. You deeply understand the biological and psychological limits of your own brain. When the inevitable storm hits and the market crashes, you do not panic. You fall back on your structural training and your algorithmic strategy. You manage your metabolic energy with absolute ruthless precision. You accept the stress not as an enemy, but as the mandatory cost of admission to the highest peaks of financial success. You sit in the dim light of your office. You look at the glowing monitor. A massive drawdown has systematically erased 6 months of your progress. But this time, your chest does not tighten in fear. You take a slow, deep, calculated breath. You are perfectly comfortable in the thin air.